All right, let's get into this. Now, I haven't done a gun rights video, sorry, in a long time. I've been kind of waiting for Bill C-42 to pass to kind of put my 2 cents on it, and I'm amazed it hasn't passed already. And there was some problems with it per se, from a pro-gun side of it. There is some problems that were, say, oh, wait a minute, this can actually backfire on gun owners quite a bit. With the basically the punishment side of things. Where the CFNA, or Canadian National Firearms, the Canadian National Firearms Association, was taking it to task with the idea that mandatory minimums, and with the problems we have with Bill C-68 and in general, is that you can go to jail for 3 years, for example, for paperwork. The guy who cut the guy's head off on the Greyhound bus a few years back in Saskatchewan, okay, he got 6 years, okay, for cutting a guy's head off basically with a knife on a bus because they found him, basically he was off his medication and he was crazy. Now this guy's out on parole already, that type of thing, and okay, so he gets 6 years for that, okay, which is you think about the severity of that crime. Now, if that's all he gets for that, okay. And then we switch it over. This is what Rod from what the heck is it? What's his channel's name? Anyway, yeah, he was saying, like, you get 3 years for not having the proper paperwork as a gun owner versus 6 years for murdering somebody on a bus in cold blood. Can like, does that not just kind of strike you as what? So when we look at it like that, the other thing is that with Bill C-42, is it really what gun owners were asking for? Well, there was something. It's a step in the right direction in some areas. For example, getting rid of the ATT, which is just basically the paperwork side of it. It's just a piece of paper. That's the only thing that we're really getting out of it, is the fact that we don't have to carry a piece of paper around. Other than that, we don't really get any wins. We don't get rid of ban by name, appearance, and reputation. We don't get, basically restoring, full capacity of magazines. We don't get, the important things like being able to use your restricted firearm anywhere you can use a safely discharged firearm, which to me, it doesn't matter the length of the barrel. You should be able to use it wherever. And we also, the classification of firearms, direct impingement rifles like ARs and stuff like that are still restricted. Same thing with the idea of the crime and punishment part, where it's been statistically proven that our Bill C-17, Bill C-51, the old Bill C-51, and Bill C-68, basically, which are all our gun law bills that in the last past 40 years or so, not one of them has any correlation with crime whatsoever. It's been statistically proven in 2012 with a peer-reviewed study. It shows that there's absolutely no correlation. So why do we still have it? Well, the reason why we still have it is because the masses are unaware of what the issues actually are. And this is going to take me to kind of a week or two ago. I ran into Brian Lilly from, he used to be on Sun News, now it's Rebel Media. And I just ran into him by accident on the street, and I was talking to him, and we were talking about gun stuff, and he was telling me, yeah, he says he was just off on his way later to get ready for a video later that day on gun restrictions in Hamilton. The mayor there was kind of acting silly. And I said, well, here, we started getting, because I knew he was a busy guy, and, places he's got to be and stuff like that. I said, I'm a gun rights owner and stuff like that. And, I said, most of it is lack of education, And one of the things I told him to say, and he actually said it, I said, and use it often. Criminal is an occupation, and you can't legislate crazy. I said the sooner people understand that, then they realize that, particularly the type of people who are pro-gun control, once they come to the realization that it actually isn't working and doesn't work, and no, it doesn't keep you safer just because you think or believe, it statistically does not make you any safer, then you have to rethink the whole thing. Now, the reasonable people, which is about 80% of the people in the middle, will probably fall on the fence of, okay, well, if that doesn't work, let's try something else. And you can reason with them. The pro-gun side is obviously no restrictions, no regulations whatsoever. I don't really go into that myself, and here's why. Now, mind you, as a Canadian, we don't have a Second Amendment like they do in the States, but and also too, from the Pierre Elliott Trudeau days, one of the things that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms strictly, you know, didn't put in was property ownership. And here in Canada, I take it more from a property ownership. I do believe that you do need training, and why? Because it's a firearm. It shoots a projectile, and in the hands of idiots and the uneducated, it could be dangerous. It's dangerous. They're dangerous no matter how you look at them. Most people don't accidentally kill themselves with firearms here in Canada. It's a very, very extremely low thing. Almost all accident-related deaths with firearms are law enforcement and military in training accidents. So we're talking about less than 50 people on average every year, 45, 50 people, give or take. Epidemic with children finding firearms and killing themselves accidentally. That is fear-mongering. It's not true. Some years you'll have a couple of kids. Other years you don't have any at all. Are they tragedies? Yes. Are the parents responsible? Yes. Obviously, you got to make sure that the kid can't get a hold of either the ammunition or the firearm, or both. One without the others is no harm, no foul. But if they can you got to make sure that they can't get a hold of both. So you got to be you got to obviously be responsible about that. You can't leave loaded firearms lying around. Now, again, in the States it's a little different because again they got the Second Amendment. There's some people that have a gun in the cookie jar, a gun in the freezer, a gun in the sofa, a gun in the behind the pillow, okay, well that's they're allowed to do that, so that's down there. Would I do that myself even if I was allowed? Probably not. My take is this: I don't care if you have a firearm for self-defense legally in the States. My issue is that if you're not around it, unload it. If you have to put a gun pretty much everywhere in your house, okay, you should just carry it on you. Why? Because if you have to be, default to a safe room or something like that, if you're in an area where you require that much security, I think that might be a bit much. Just keep it close to you. Just keep it somewhere where you can get to it. And if there's little kids around, then obviously, you got to keep it close to you. I mean, for the extra it would take to carry it, just carry the darn thing. That way you're in charge of it. Leaving it loaded and unattended is something I'm completely against. Why? Because if you are using it for self-defense, then you need it near you. Okay, yeah, I can put it down in a room or something like that, but obviously if it's loaded, it's got to be somewhere where you can get to it really quickly. The best place to have it is on your hip, or something like that. Now, walking around the comforts of your home, maybe you put it on the nightstand, whatever. But as long as when you're done with it, okay, you're going to bed or whatever, unload it, put it away, whatever, and maybe you have another one near the nightstand or whatever, or just keep the magazine out of it, the chamber open, leave it on the desk. I mean, if you don't have enough time to grab the pistol and slap the magazine in it and rack one into the chamber, you're probably not going to have enough time to grab the pistol anyway. So this is just the way I look at it. Now, that said, here in Canada, should we have that right? I believe we should. I do believe in a castle doctrine. I do believe it's important that we have gun ownership, and I also believe you need to be trained. And for training, what I'm talking about is basic gun safety, like the training we already have. And most gun owners in Canada are okay with that. Yeah, there's a few out there that are like, there should be no training whatsoever, whatever. But I don't know. Like for me, yeah, I grew up around firearms, everything like that. So for me, it was natural to be safe with them, But for somebody who's never grown up around firearms, I'm happy that there's a course there that, kind of, can weed out the incompetent, not the crazies, but the incompetent, So that I think is a good idea. So training is key. Now, if we're allowed here in Canada, and you have to call your MPs and MLAs, let them know what side of the fence you're on and which way you're going to vote, to ever get change. We are pushing the Conservative government into, you have to understand, they're not pro-gun. They are not pro-gun, because if they're pro-gun, look, if they can pass, anti-terrorism laws in 15 minutes, they can get rid of Bill C-68, but they are using it to string it along. The problem is the gun owner crowd in Canada, I'm unfortunately, I see the NDP winning the next election in Canada. Why? Because I think the gun owners are just not going to vote. Now, here's the thing. this will be say goodbye to your valuable, if you have restricted, they're going to be banned almost immediately. They will be able to rein in that legislation so fast, and we know how pro-UN the NDP is. That's all they talk about. Like I'm listening to almost everything they talk about links back to UN policy, which scares the crap out of me. They're basically, they want to give the country away to the, to the to the United Nations. So that means gun control would definitely be implemented instantaneously, regardless of the outrage. Because at that point, once they have control, I mean, they're gonna bring it in quick, and they're not gonna, you see how hard it is to get rid of anything. It takes, they bring in Bill C-68 overnight, but it takes like 20 years to get rid of the long gun registry. And if the data is actually gone, do you really trust them? I don't know. Um, but that said, the thing is that if we get to a point where we're going to lose our firearms, at that point, people are going to have to, come up with, we're going to have a referendum on the issue. Problem is this is exactly why, mainstream media like the CBC and stuff like that, they cover, sometimes they'll make, cover a small documentary on, the gun owners. They did it with the CNFA and stuff like that. Uh, and they didn't paint it too bad, but the reporter, you could tell he was like trying to be as squeamish around the guns as possible, kind of like, is having this many guns in your house, do you really think you should have that many in your house? I'm like, you could see that kind of, trying to lead the audience into a kind of an anti-gun mindset. So yes, we know these are responsible gun owners, but they're still really dangerous tools. Look, driving and texting, if you want to talk about public safety, driving and texting that's an epidemic right there. That's something you should be scared of. It's worse than drinking and driving. Almost all accidents now are almost somebody talking on the cell phone. It's just ridiculous. But yet they're worried about anomalies, and the thing is when we look at the gun crime in Canada, it's been dropping steadily, mainly due to aging demographic, not to gun control. And the other thing about it too is that every time we get rid of a law, the laws, like we got rid of the long gun registry, and the crime rate goes down. Now, my prediction is when we get rid of the ATT, okay, we're going to see another drop in the crime rate. Why? Because we're getting rid of the paper crime. So when we're looking at the 40,000 or so, give or take, average crimes committed with firearms every year in Canada, we're really looking at a lot of paper crime. People who didn't register rifles, people who don't have their possession acquisition license or restricted possession acquisition license, that type of thing. That's what we're really talking about. I mean, we're not talking about massive criminality here. A lot of people make the correlation of the legalization of pot and stuff like that. It's a victimless crime. Well, here's the way I look at it. Okay, should you regulate it? Maybe to a degree. For example, you want to make, regulate the, the usage in the sense of where you can safely discharge a firearm, because that's public safety. You don't want people shooting pop cans in the back of their suburban home, in the middle of, or, shooting pop cans off their balcony in the city type of thing. You don't want stuff like that. So yeah, okay, regulation, most gun owners are like, well, have regulations where you can discharge a firearm. That's fine. The types of firearms you're allowed to discharge, I think, is irrelevant. I mean, if you can own one firearm and you're law-abiding, I mean, this is the thing that the anti-gun crowd, they can never make the case for. So you're telling me if I own a deer hunting rifle, say like a 30-06, I usually, because it's probably the most common caliber used for large game in Canada and the United States, 30-06, which is a pretty powerful round. That's a pretty stout round, okay? And you're saying that, okay, you could take that out to the back 40, and fire off a couple of rounds out of that, as long as you're well outside, where you're safe to discharge legally a firearm. That's no problem. But if that person were to have a handgun and not shoot on a range, well, that they could be a threat to humanity. I mean, it's a little bit the demonization of firearms owners is just kind of ridiculous at this point, because statistically speaking, we're 3 times less likely to break the law than anybody else. If you go through all the hoops and regulations it takes to become a firearms owner in Canada, which is not as bad as some countries, but it's still pretty bad. It would be worse, if they could get that, if they could get it. And the thing is that because we're, statistically the most law-abiding, what people don't, they still get these strange misconceptions of how people view their firearms. I mean, another Brian Lilly interview with it was a professor or whatever from Ottawa U, and I was actually kind of strangely. Usually, everybody coming out of there is pretty left wing, you know. So it was kind of weird to see a professor kind of do a study on it and studying firearms owners. And what he does is, like he said, well, when he was a young lad, his dad took him out. He went shooting. He says his dad wasn't a big target shooter. He's not a target shooter or like that or a hunter. He just, he tried it. He knows what it's about. And most people, after they try it, number one, I've yet to see somebody that I've shown how to shoot a firearm for the first time not be grinning ear to ear. Even people who would be almost too terrified to try a firearm because of the stigma that goes around an inanimate object. But when you take somebody out to go shooting and legally and stuff like that, and they try it for the first time, as long as the internet's full of jackasses that the guy hands like the 500 Magnum to the scrawny 90-pound girl, say, here, pull the trigger on this. Yeah, it makes for a funny video, but people that have been killed shooting those things, they're too powerful for the inexperienced. Even for the experienced, something like that is extremely powerful. So you got to treat it with respect, and unfortunately some people have been killed doing that. Again, very rare that it happens, but when it does happen, of course, the media just hones in on that, saying, this is how dangerous they are, they're way too powerful, and all this, and that. You get the idea. It works against us. So, to me, I'm looking at it, responsibility is of the gun owner to teach people how to do it right and do it safely. But once they've tried it, usually you start somebody off on a 22. I'm a huge fan of BB guns. Yes, I shoot, my 308. I've shot, a 460 Weatherby once. That's like an elephant cartridge, elephant gun, dinosaur killer thing. It was painful. It was really painful, but it was fun. I don't want to ever do it again. Well, maybe I'll try it one more time. I don't know. But the point is that BB guns, they're a great way to get people used to handling a firearm. And then from there, you might graduate them to like a 22. And within the same afternoon, you could probably have them shooting the 30-06. Load one round at a time, that type of deal. Semi-autos, same thing. Once they get the mannerisms, you correct their behavior. Once they build up the muscle memory and things start kind of becoming automatic, and then safety just becomes a habit. The Axe Improves here in Canada, I think, is one of the best safety anagrams that you can use for firearms. It works if you use that all the time. Whenever you hear the saying that the unloaded gun shot somebody, well, they're not unloaded until after they shot somebody. So somebody didn't do their Axe Improves. That type of thing. And accidents can happen, sure. People trip, people fall, but usually guns can't pull their own triggers. So far the science has shown that fact that firearms cannot pull their own triggers. Therefore, the danger comes down to the responsibility of knowing how to handle a firearm safely. So training, again, becomes key here. And like a one-day course is not really that much to ask of people, I don't think. Where I think it becomes tedious to ask of people is all the other hoops, the unreasonable stuff. For example, I'll start with the background check. Now, here in Canada, we do background checks. It didn't make anybody any safer, and it doesn't make anybody any safer. And unfortunately, you'll hear the left typically argue that well, we need to weed out the crazies and stuff like that, but a lot of people don't understand. Almost all the crazies out there got turned down. When they go to buy firearms legally, they get turned down. Why? They have some sort of prohibitionary order against them, or they don't have the proper documentation. So that side of it, yeah, it works, but the only thing that gets scooted away is liability. Then they just go to the black market to get it. So again, you can't legislate crazy and criminal as an occupation. When somebody gets it in their head to do something bad, they're going to do it. We just passed here in Canada. We're just passing the 1-year anniversary of the 3 Mounties that were shot in Moncton, and I'll be doing a video on that later, a little bit later on, once they reveal the monument and stuff. And the guy who did that, obviously, there was nothing to really stop him. There was nothing to stop him. The paperwork don't stop him. So even if he were to ban guns, he would have gotten one illegally and done it. And if guns had never been invented, he probably would have used something else. And that's the whole point, is that it's not the firearm that makes somebody do something bad. They already have the intent to do something bad. And that's what we need to focus on. That's where the real question is the money we're going to waste on gun control, we could be putting into mental health services. We could be putting into extra policing. We could be putting into, surveillance, that type of thing. Or, more importantly, into training. One of the things that, as a Canadian, a lot of people, think Canadians are kind of against American style gun control. And I don't think that is correct at all. Most people I talk to, you know, like a lot of my friends that particularly from the city and stuff like that, they see like my shooting videos and stuff like that. And at first, it kind of was uneasy for a lot of them there because they're like, they're not used to seeing that, because they're always told on the mainstream media it's a bad thing, to own guns and stuff like that. And after they watch a few videos, they're like, can we come and play? I want to learn too. How do I get a gun? And again, it's always that same thing. Everybody I've ever taken shooting for the first time in their lives, again, I could put a $1,000,000 on a bet on it that you're going to see smile. People are going to smile. Why? Because and if they learned how to actually hit something, early on, and they actually get the fundamentals of shooting and catch on really quick. Usually, you put them at like near unmissable range. It's the ego booster that gives you when you make a good shot. Is just they start to they start to appreciate it. So firearms ownership, like the professor at the Carleton U that Brian Lilly was interviewing, he was saying, like, he says the plethora of types of gun owners in Canada is quite large. We have deer hunters, we have large game hunters like moose hunters, we have bird hunters. I mean, you want something exciting, take your kid, legally of course, go hunting partridge, aka wild chickens. You will have so much fun. And it's such a great, and if you want to challenge yourself as a bird hunter, the woodcock, if you can hit one of them damn things, you need like freaking artillery to hit one of those things. They take off at warp speed in a like a zigzag pattern. They fly straight up. They'll be like from 0 to 300 feet in like a few seconds. It's just unbelievable how fast these birds are. And if you can hit one of those, you're like you're going to be doing your happy dance. They're so hard to hit. I've shot where they've been several times. I was like, oh, I'll get you, you beaky flapper. I'm going to get you. But it becomes a challenge. Not everybody hunts. I get that. Small game hunting is a lot of fun. But then there's just the old plinking with the 22. A lot of people like that. And then there's competition shooting, like skeet shooting or trap shooting. And then there's the other things like tactical shooting. There's which I kind of like the tactical stuff. The only problem is it gets expensive because you're like, it gets expensive, but the fun is just unbelievable. And then there's of course high precision bent shooting, which is just. I was just talking to one of my dad's friends today. He's got this rifle that weighs like 20 pounds. You put one shot in it at a time, and you go for the closest accuracy you can get. And these guys, when they shoot, they compete to the point where if you shoot a group bigger than the size of a dime, your rifle's no more good. It's like, oh, this thing's shooting all over the place. Most people have no idea how challenging that is to shoot less than a 2 or 3 inch group. Most rifles are capable of shooting much better than the person behind the trigger. So that's why it's always a great challenge, because you know that you can always do just a little bit better, just a little bit more. My thing that I find fun, and yes, I will be doing it really soon, is shooting pill bottles off a fence at like 100 yards, which is a football field. And a pill bottle, not like a big kind of giant Advil bottle that's like the size of a cigarette pack. No, I'm talking like like heart pill bottle type of thing, that a little bit bigger than the size of your thumb. And I did it with the 22. I've now got some 30-30 rounds for that Model 94 Winchester 30-30, and I will be shooting that thing off the fence. It's just the weather's really bad right now. That's why I'm making videos rather than being out making videos shooting. But I'll tell you, I took that thing out, okay, and I haven't shot this thing in a long time. Now, I had a little bit of a bizarre experience at the range the last time I was there. The front sight fell off of it, so I had to kind of, it's an old gun. It could be from the 1920s, 1940s, or the 1970s, but it's an old gun. So anyway, I'm out there and I'm shooting, and incidentally, my repairer actually lined up the rifle so that I was able to, pretty much zero the rifle, and it's ready for my challenge shot, of the pill bottle off the fence at 100 yards. This is a difficult shot to do because of it really makes you, it forces you to do the fundamentals of shooting. It becomes a science. And I do this on iron sights, not with a scope, by the way. Now, the thing is I can't see the pill bottle at that distance. Like, I could see it, but I can't distinguish it at that distance. What it does is I know where the rifle hits in relative to the sights. So if I'm doing my part, the rifle will do its. And at that point, that's how I hit the bottle. It's when I can't see the bottle, it means the bead is right on top of that bottle. So that means if I shake the rifle, if I jerk the rifle, or like that, it's not going to hit where I want it to hit, and I don't hit the bottle. But I know if I do everything, breathe properly, hold her steady, squeeze, don't pull. I hit the bottle, then you feel like $1,000,000 after you've done it. And not only that, it's entertaining and it impresses people when they see that. Aim small, miss small. And the thing about that is a lot of people will never understand what it's like to do that and why to do that. It's the challenge. It's the challenge is why you do that. And that there gives you a sense of confidence, and it also gives you a sense of self-reliance that you can do that. That you're not so much mastered it, because you can never master shooting in the sense that it's something. There's always something to learn, whether you're reloading or not reloading, but there's always something you can learn about. And not only that, it gets you outdoors. And the other thing a lot of people don't understand about the firearms community, especially like you go to like a range or something like that, you meet a lot of people and you meet all walks of life. And this is something that when the Carleton guy professor was talking about that, he couldn't believe like the whole range of people. Most people think that the only people that own guns are right wingers. Now you have to understand the majority of Canadians are left wing, but one thing he discovered is that a lot of left wingers were voting right wing. Why? To keep their guns. Now, like I said, Tony Bernardo from the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, in an interview with not Brian Lilly, but Brian from Right Edition News, I get a kick out of him. He's great. When he asked him, he says, which party is the best one to support gun owners? And his simple answer was none of them. And it's true. Again, the Harper government has had a majority for how long now? And they're going to break before the summer and not give the gun owners a little bit of something. Maybe Bill C-42, they realize, okay, this is just not enough. We need to, we need to give them something, or we're not going to get, because that's how they got their majority government. I can guarantee you. And right now, the Harper government it's two main staples. Again, they're not pro-gun. It's just they're saying, well, we can get a little bit out of them if we give the gun owners something. Then the other ones are the veterans and the people who support veterans. So they've got basically three groups of people of their meat and potatoes staple voting that they haven't given anything to. Well, fair is fair. They've given it a little bit, but they haven't done what we wanted them to do. They've had enough time to do it. So the thing is, I think in the next election, unfortunately, people sit it out and say, well, if they're just not going to, do anything for me, there's no incentive to vote for them. And that leads to us losing a lot of, again, when the Liberals' agenda is Australian-style gun control, the NDP can't rave about the United Nations enough. So that means, and we know the Coalition for Gun Control, which, yes, was brought in with the Liberals, but the Coalition for Gun Control is NDP. And they brought in basically United Nations style. Bill C-68 is United Nations style gun control. That's what it is. If you track the bill back, Norway adopted kind of like a version of Bill C-68. They call it something else over there, but that was just kind of like the more progressed version of what we got. England pretty much took the full force of it. Australia, they took the full force of it. And when we look statistically at these other countries, those extra restrictions have done nothing. They've done nothing. You have to get people into the debate with statistics and logic. You can't bring it in with they want to trivialize on every mass shooting, and the problem with that is that these mass shootings, okay, they're anomalies. And the firearm type doesn't even matter. Like right now, okay, the demonization is like AR-15s and stuff like that. But you have to understand the very first coined mass shooter in the States, Charles Whitman, he used a bolt-action rifle. I mean, he was shooting people out to 500 yards or 5 football fields away. Most people would not have heard the shot. Now, mind you, this guy had really good shooting skills. Okay. Now, the other problem with that is he killed more people than what James Holmes did with a 100-round magazine, at pretty much point-blank range. And wounded 45 people. James Holmes wounded 38. Okay, again, so the skill level is what the difference is, but the intent was the same. So if you give a guy like Charles Whitman a AR-15, is he going to be any more deadly? Probably not. Why? Because their plan is the same. He took a rifle he knew how to shoot very well at long ranges, and that's what worked. Now, he had a few rifles with him. For close range, he had an M1 carbine, okay, which would have probably been, they're not the most accurate rifle either, but probably would have been okay for what he was doing, so to speak. Not that I'm condoning this, but just painting the picture for you. That was for the close range stuff. He also had a shotgun to blast his way into the observatory, and he killed, I think, 2 people on his way in. And then, of course, he had about 700 rounds, and then he had a, just your regular Model 70 deer hunting rifle. And with that, he was able to accomplish the same amount that James Holmes did. In fact, he killed more people and wounded slightly more people. Now, James Holmes, what they said, said, oh, it was 80 people. No, because they counted people who, got injured by, glass and trampling and stuff like that. They counted them as injuries as well, and that'll bring you up to about 80 people. But actual people that only got shot was 38. So when you're looking at that, again, the firearm type isn't exactly the be-all end-all. Most of these guys don't know how to use these things, which is kind of a good thing to their max efficiency. That said, a lot of these rifles, hot rod rifles like AR-15s and stuff like that, they don't do very well out long range. So again, people are going to use these things in close quarters, right? So that brings you to another thing. Well, if you're in close quarters and you're not going to be able to get away from this guy, the idea of the left, what I coin as the left, it's usually left-wing governments that typically want to ban guns. But what they don't explain to people is, okay, well, when you're trapped in the same building as a madman, it's a fish in a barrel situation. You can only deal with them. You can't run at that point. They want you to, if you can't run, that's the best thing you can do. And I put it, there's like 4 types of people. When the shooter comes in, like say in like Polytechnique or whatever, okay. And this is what Bill 68 was brought in on. That things like that would never happen again if we brought in all this gun control. And yet we had several shootings since, including Dawson College and whatever. And 23 people were shot there. Now, Bill C-68 was supposed to stop that, but I guess nobody told the guy. So anyway, point is that you get first person when the shooting starts, they just freeze. They just stand there. They don't know what to do. They usually, static targets ventilate easily. They usually end up getting shot. Okay, then you have the second type of person, the runner. These people, they live most of the time. Why? They all flood for the door at the same time. Yeah, a few of them might get wounded, a few of them might get injured on the way out, but they get out of there. Okay, so that's usually the best. Then you got the third type, the hide and seek person. Columbine is a perfect example of the people in the library. Yeah, they hid until they were found, and then we know what happened to the poor buggers. And then the fourth type of person, the martyr. And the reason why I call them the martyrs is because very rarely do they live. Now, in the Loeffner case, yes, a bunch of people were able to tackle him while he reloaded. Usually that doesn't happen. The Sikh temple shooting, he actually got close enough for the guy to stab him, but he still got shot and killed in the process. And it didn't stop. It wasn't until the other officer showed up to take down the guy. At that point, it was a shootout until the officer won, right? And then there's a whole bunch of other ones where people have tried to stop the attacker unarmed. And of course, bullets can close the distance faster than what your feet can most of the time, and usually that's what happens. But the way they want to play it off is that, well, you just tackle the guy, take it from him while he's reloading. Well, number one, you have to have, considering how crazy the situation would be, you have to have the clarity of mind to recognize he's reloading. You're probably going to be stunned. You're going to be sitting there going, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. You'll watch him. You could probably watch him reload in slow motion. By the time you realize that that's your opportunity, it's too late. He's already reloaded. So whether he has 5 rounds or 20 rounds or 30 rounds or 100 rounds, it doesn't really matter. When he reloads, he reloads. Now the thing is there is one thing that usually trumps this idea of trying to tackle unarmed person, because again, you don't know, maybe while he's reloading he might just go to a backup firearm or a knife, who knows, right? But again, the point is that although the left always tries to play off well, look, they tackled this guy here, they didn't need a gun to stop him, they got lucky. They got lucky. That's all I'm going to say is they got lucky. It's most of the times people don't get that lucky. But here's one thing that usually does work almost 90% of the time, is if other people are armed. Usually it's the gun-free zone that usually gets people killed. So where there's people that are carrying in the States, you got like 11 million people that carry permits in the States, okay, out of the 300 some odd million that are down there. And out of that, almost everywhere, statistically, you can look it up for yourself, almost everywhere people are allowed to use firearms in self-defense, the crime rate drops typically 30 to 40% across the board. Now, the slogan from John Lott, more guns equals less crime, is not really accurate. More guns or less crime is irrelevant. that has nothing to do with your crime rate. Why? Because crime isn't about the firearm, it's about the individual with intent. It's always about intent. But what does make a difference is when people are allowed to use a firearm for self-defense, then it can be factored into raising or lowering crime. Because again, if the bad guy gets shot, well, usually it's not like when you have a high crime rate area, it's usually not a whole bunch of people committing the crime in that area. It's usually only a handful of people. In other words, repeat offenders, and not necessarily people that have been caught yet. So the guy who stole the car on Wednesday, he might steal one on Thursday as well. So it looks like you have two different robberies, but they're pulled off by the same guy. That type of thing. So what happens when if they get shot, okay, they typically that lowers the crime rate. If they get caught by the police or caught by, a person, does a citizen's arrest, they get taken off the street. That lowers the crime rate. What bad guy A sees bad guy B gets shot. Bad guy A gets a job, that lowers your crime rate. So that makes sense, and it is kind of cause and effect in a direct way that you can actually link it, because they have done studies where they say, okay, well, before a ban here and after a ban here, and you can see when they start allowing people to use firearms in self-defense, of course, you see the crime rates drop down. Now, that said, here in Canada, we're a long way from that. It will happen if we push for it. Problem is we got to get rid of Bill C-68 before we can do that. Problem is, if we get the NDP government, the only way we can get this going is that a referendum. And the only way we could win on the referendum is if we could get the debate going in the mainstream media. Problem is when you have basically one media source in the country, not just one, but the biggest one is the CBC. CTV is a part of CBC. Global is part of CBC. They're all part, umbrella. It's an umbrella corporation, right? And the problem with that is the CBC will never ever bring the gun debate in an actual debate on the news, because every time they do, and they've probed it, and when they do, they find out it backfires on the anti-gun crowd all the time, because the statistics are on the side of the gun owner. Now, I've seen some of the statistics in the states that try to go against the gun ownership stuff, and you have to watch how they're manipulated and doctored. And if you follow my channel, you've probably picked out a lot of the stuff. For example, the one I use the most to watch it for is that if you have a firearm in your home, you're 40% more likely to have it used against you in a crime. Okay, there's a problem with that. Well, number one data that's probably incomplete is places where crimes were committed, but we don't know if a firearm was available or not. That's one. Number two, we have to factor in how many crimes there are a year. We're talking between you stole my jube and murders in Canada. You're looking at it on average, every kind of crime you could think of, about 7 million on the books. 7-8 million. That's everything. Most crimes are petty. If we're talking violent crime, it's usually 400,000. That's mostly like muggings and beating up and people bashing each other over the head with beer bottles on a Friday night type of thing. Murders, which is good, we're very, very low. But the thing is that what people don't get, is that where do they get a number of 40%? Or even sometimes it's 40%, sometimes they give you 23%. Okay, well, first off, we have to look at how many firearms are in the country. Well, at last count, there was about 8 million registered firearms in the country. At last registered count. Okay, and the problem is we don't see a loss of 23% or 40%, let alone 40% of gun owners. I mean, what's 40% of 8 million? What's 40% of or 23% of 8 million? Okay, but we have to move it back a bit. Okay, why? Because they're in possession acquisition license, which is still kind of a gun registry in itself. It just doesn't tell you the makes and models of firearms, but it tells the police have already had access to this anyway. But our possession acquisition license tells how many firearms owners. Okay, well, we're 2 million and growing. Yeah, there was a little bit of a slump, but it'll pick back up again. It comes and it goes. And so 2 million gun owners. Okay, what's 40% of 2 million gun owners? What's 23% of 2 million gun owners? Well, okay, so this should reflect in the murder rate, obviously, right? But the problem is we're well under 600 murders per year. We're at the lowest, from the last count, we're at the lowest murder homicide rate since 1966. Okay, that's a far cry from 23%. So where does the anti-gun crowd get this number? Well, I'll tell you where they get it. When they look at spouses murdered, okay, what they got was In 2010, I believe the year was. You'll have to search it out for yourself. But in 2010, there were 14 or 15 women that were murdered by their spouse. 23% were murdered with a firearm. So that means out of the 15 people, okay, 23% were murdered with a firearm, and that's how they make it. But sound like a firearm in your house is that much more dangerous. Even if you factor in the suicide rate, with is a total different issue altogether. Again, here in Canada, we have to legally lock up our firearms, which yes has lowered accidental deaths in the home, or probably has lowered it in the home after we started locking up our firearms. And yes, the suicide rate by firearm went down, but the suicide rate is still where it is. We're talking about usually typically 34 to 3,500 people a year, between 3 and 4,000 is every year, but for a decade. That's our suicide rate for the year, and the bulk of them used to be with the firearms, but now that we locked them up, it's dropped down a bit. So did we see people getting help and therapy and stuff like that? No, all we saw was basically people resorting to hanging themselves and other methods. Hanging is still the #1 method of suicide in Canada. So the problem with that is that we just displaced the problem. So for the anti-gun crowd sitting there going cheer, 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 we've saved lives. Well, you didn't save a single life. Again, the issue is not with the firearm. It's not the firearm that makes somebody commit suicide. It's not the firearm that makes somebody go do a mass killing. It's not the firearm that makes somebody, do a robbery or whatever. They already have that intent. The tool is just whatever they find. Most people will probably use knives for robberies or baseball bats. Most, stabbings are always more higher. There's almost no decade or no year where you can find knife crime lower than firearms crime. It's always higher. Stabbings are almost, 10-15% more. In 2013, I think was the last crime rate report. Maybe 2004. I think it was 2013. Might have been 2014. It was like 143 murders by firearm and 195 or something like that by knife. So again, availability, there's absolutely no restrictions on knives whatsoever, pretty much in here in Canada. Well, there is some. You can own switchblades and stuff like that, but kitchen knives are readily available. They're not locked up. So when you're looking at it like that, okay, so is it the knife that makes the person go do something bad? No, they have the intent to. So we have other issues that we have to deal with, and that's what the anti-gun crowd doesn't want to deal with. Is that you have to deal with mental illness, you have to deal with crime and punishment, you have to deal with basically policing, and you have to deal with self-defense. In other words, you will be the first responder to your attacker. I can't stress that enough. And this idea of, well, you don't need a gun to defend yourself. Well, that's what people say until they have to defend themselves. So with that said, I mean, you could look at it another way. I remember one person saying, you don't need a gun in Canada to defend yourself. I'm at such and such age and I've never been attacked and stuff like that. It doesn't work like that. I don't go down these nefarious areas and stuff. It doesn't work like that. I know a guy a couple of years ago, a relative of a person in the town here, was sleeping in his bed in a few towns over. Somebody jumped in, went and stabbed him. They never caught the person. Maybe he could have fended them off, you know what I mean, or something with a firearm. Trust me, where they pulled it. I think it was Penn and Teller with the gun control is BS video, which was really good. One of the things they did is they pulled prisoners and they said, who do you fear more, a cop with a gun or a citizen with a gun? They always said a citizen. Why? Because they're going to shoot you. They're not doing it to get paid. They're doing it to save their lives, right? So that type of thing. So logically speaking, it's a simple question to anybody who wants to get shot. The answer is nobody, unless they got a death wish, right? I mean, there is suicide by cop and stuff like that, but again, it's a suicidal mentality. It's a mental health issue that we need to deal with there. But the point is that you poll most people and ask if they want to get shot. The answer will be no, whether they're criminal or not. And when you say, okay, well, this is an area of the city or a town or whatever that has the ability to defend themselves with firearms in their home or on their persons, well, at that point, bad guys just say, well, it's just too risky to do business here. You know what I mean? Remember, criminal is an occupation. It is an occupation. It's what they do for a living. That's why when you can't figure out why did they do this, it's because that's their job. It's what they do. And when the bad guys show up, you have to be able to deal with them. But what I advocate for is training. And I know some people watch these videos And they completely miss that. And they're saying, well, anybody and everybody can have a gun. And well, here's the kicker. Yes, anybody and everybody anywhere in the world can have a gun if they choose to do it illegally. The only people that obey gun laws are law-abiding people. The people you don't have to worry about. This is the kicker. So if somebody has nefarious, kind of, they're up to no good type of thing, well, that person probably already has the illegal gun. They're probably already carrying it. And even if you factor that in, the illegal guns in the country, which there's millions of illegal guns here, and most of them is not hardened criminals. It's Farmer Joe who never registered his gun or took the long gun course. That's what it is. So those people you're never going to have to worry about. But the street thug, that type of guy, the mobster, whatever, those guys are already walking around with guns. They already have them. And the thing is if they decide to do something, you can only deal with them with whatever tools you have. Here in Canada, it's pretty much all but illegal to defend yourself. There's Article 33 and 34 of the Criminal Code, and I suggest you read them carefully, but they leave it so loose-ended that almost any prosecutor could have a field day with you and say, well, you could have done this, you could have done that, and then they'll charge you anyway. So that needs to change. But the thing is people do need to be able to defend themselves. And that's why they won't have the debate on, like in Canada here. They try to keep the debate as minimal as possible because it's so easy to undo any anti-gun argument that you get thrown your way. You could pretty much undo pretty easily. And it really does double back to the three things I talk about the most. Intent. Okay, when there's intent involved, that's the root cause of everything is intent. It's I intend to do this, I intend to do that. And you can't legislate crazy, and criminal is an occupation. The sooner people get that, then we can have sensible gun ownership in Canada. That takes away the semantic stuff like, okay, well, the scary black rifles have to be restricted. It should be basically, you should be able to own any type of firearm. I'm not asking to own an Abrams tank or a Leopard tank. I'm not asking to own rocket launchers. I'm not asking to own nuclear missiles. All these kind of crazy, artillery guns. I'm not asking to own those things for self-defense. That's, bearable arms. And that's what it says in the American Constitution. Bearable arms means you can carry it. Now, rocket launcher, sure, you can carry one of that, but that's not a practical firearm. That's artillery. That's something totally different. Nobody is asking for that, but the anti-gun crowd say, well, if you can have that, well, why can't you have this? That's not what they're asking for. Reasonable firearms. I think you should be allowed to carry a handgun. A rifle is too much. Rifle in the bush, sure, fine. Anywhere it's safe to discharge a firearm, you should be able to carry any firearm you would like. Now what about machine guns? Oh, we can't have people with machine guns. Well, trust me, machine guns are no more dangerous than a semi-automatic. And here's why, because people don't understand what the functionality of a machine gun is. The short of it is it's concentrated fire in an area, and machine guns are out of bullets very quickly. Bad guys, professional bad guys don't use machine guns to rob people because they'd be out of ammo so fast. They'll have nothing, except for the LA shootout where the guys were on drugs and they had, thousands of rounds with them. But even at that, they could have been at it a lot longer. They were running out of ammo. That's why they started moving, which was kind of good. And they, for the amount of ammo they expended, they didn't kill a single person, which is unbelievable. The only people that got killed was them, and it's unbelievable. And so this is why people don't use machine guns for hoists. Machine guns are meant to keep soldiers pinned down over there somewhere while your other guys are taking careful aim at them. So that's why it's, to me, machine gun ownership, I think there should be a training level for that, because you got more recoil, subsequent recoil to deal with. So training. So but the basic point is, training is the key to everything. So I think we should put everything at a level. So anybody that would, you put a training course, kind of call it a deputized citizen or whatever, this person can meet this requirement to defend themselves with a handgun. They meet enough of a requirement they can defend themselves in a home. And make it, reasonable. They don't have to be Chuck Norris. They just have to be able to do that. Okay, they meet a second requirement, they can now carry it on the street into certain areas. If you want to have restricted zones where, for example, like government buildings and stuff like that, which already have armed security, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Then people could be disarmed in there because you already got somebody there with, firearms. So the way I look at it, put it at everything as a shall issue basis rather than a may issue basis. Here in Canada, believe it or not, we do have the right to carry on a may issue basis. Problem is nobody can ever get. You could fill out all the form work, send in your $40 for 1 year or $80 for 2 years, And even as a licensed trapper, they almost never issue to anybody. Very, very few people. I think since the year 2000, only 19 people have gotten carry permits in Canada, and it should be a shall issue basis. Here's the requirement, you can do it, and I think that's reasonable. But that can only happen if we call our MPs and MLAs. Call them anyway. I mean, again, it's more of just letting them know what side of the coin you're going to vote on, unless they start giving you what you want. It's an election year. Time to put the pressure on. I mean, again, the first politician that comes out pro-gun and asking for the things I'm asking for, I can guarantee you poll any person on the planet saying, should we have the right to carry? A lot of people will say no, and say, well, if we had the right to carry, would you carry? Most people say, yeah. You know what I mean? If it was legal, yeah. So it's how you phrase it. Say, or would you like to have the right to carry to protect your family in a madman scenario? Most people are going to say, yeah. Have it, not need it, not have it. You get it. So anyway, I got to leave it at that. So there's so much more I could talk about on this, but I haven't done one of these videos in a while. I thought I'd do one now. So if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Links will be down below. Also, the links to call your MPs now MLAs. Now's the time to do it before they go on summer holiday. But they will be out touring around, so it's a good time to let them know how you feel about the firearms thing. Kill them with kindness, hit them with logic and reasonability, and maybe, who knows, someday people will get it. Next to that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like, be true to yourself, be true to others, and always do the right thing, and have yourselves a great day, eh? G'day, hi, and welcome. Alright, let's get into this. Now, I haven't done a gun rights video, sorry, in a long time. I've been kind of waiting for Bill C-42 to pass to kind of put my 2 cents on it, and I'm amazed it hasn't passed already. And there was some problems with it, per se, from a pro-gun side of it. There is some problems that were, say, oh, wait a minute, this can actually backfire on gun owners quite a bit. With the, basically, the punishment side of things. Where the CFNA, or Canadian National Firearms, the Canadian National Firearms Association, was taking it to task with the idea that mandatory minimums, and with the problems we have with Bill C-68 and in general, is that you can go to jail for 3 years, for example, for paperwork. The guy who cut the guy's head off on the Greyhound bus a few years back in Saskatchewan, okay, he got 6 years, okay, for cutting a guy's head off, basically with a knife on a bus, because they found him, basically he was off his medication and he was crazy. Now this guy's out on parole already, that type of thing, and okay, so he gets 6 years for that, okay, which is, you think about the severity of that crime. Now, if that's all he gets for that, okay, and then we switch it over. This is what Rod from what the heck is it? What's his channel's name? Anyway, yeah, he was saying, like, you get 3 years for not having the proper paperwork as a gun owner, versus 6 years for murdering somebody on a bus in cold blood. Can you, like, does that not just kind of strike you as what? So when we look at it like that, the other thing is that with Bill C-42, is it really what gun owners were asking for? Well, there was something. It's a step in the right direction in some areas. For example, getting rid of the ATT, which is just basically the paperwork side of it. It's just a piece of paper. That's the only thing that we're really getting out of it, is the fact that we don't have to carry a piece of paper around. Other than that, we don't really get any wins. We don't get rid of ban by name, appearance, and reputation. We don't get, basically restoring, full capacity of magazines. We don't get, the important things like being able to use your restricted firearm anywhere you can use a safely discharged firearm, which to me, it doesn't matter the length of the barrel. You should be able to use it wherever. And we also, the classification of firearms, direct impingement rifles like ARs and stuff like that are still restricted. Same thing with the idea of the crime and punishment part, where it's been statistically proven that our Bill C-17, Bill C-51, the old Bill C-51, and Bill C-68 basically, which are all our gun law bills that in the last past 40 years or so. Not one of them has any correlation with crime whatsoever. It's been statistically proven in 2012 with a peer-reviewed study. It shows that there's absolutely no correlation. So why do we still have it? Well, the reason why we still have it is because the masses are unaware of what the issues actually are. And this is going to take me to kind of a week or two ago. I ran into Brian Lilly from, he used to be on Sun News, now it's Rebel Media. And I just ran into him by accident on the street. And I was talking to him, and we were talking about gun stuff. And he was telling me, yeah, he says he was just off on his way later to get ready for a video later that day on gun restrictions in Hamilton. The mayor there was kind of acting silly. And I said, well, here, we started getting, because I knew he was a busy guy, and, places he's got to be and stuff like that. I said, I'm a gun rights owner and stuff like that. And, I said, most of it is lack of education, And one of the things I told him to say, and he actually said it, I said, and use it often. Criminal is an occupation, and you can't legislate crazy. I said the sooner people understand that, then they realize that, particularly the type of people who are pro-gun control, once they come to the realization that it actually isn't working and doesn't work, and no, it doesn't keep you safer just because you think or believe, it statistically does not make you any safer, then you have to think the whole thing. Now, the reasonable people, which is about 80% of the people in the middle, will probably fall on the fence of, okay, well, if that doesn't work, let's try something else. And you can reason with them. The pro-gun side is obviously no restrictions, no regulations whatsoever. I don't really go into that myself, and here's why. Now, mind you, as a Canadian, we don't have a Second Amendment like they do in the States, and also too, from the Pierre Elliott Trudeau days, one of the things that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms strictly, didn't put in was property ownership. And here in Canada, I take it more from a property ownership. I do believe that you do need training. And why? Because it's a firearm, it shoots a projectile, and in the hands of idiots and the uneducated, it could be dangerous. It's dangerous. They're dangerous no matter how you look at them. Most people don't accidentally kill themselves with firearms here in Canada. It's a very, very extremely low thing. Almost all accident-related deaths with firearms are law enforcement and military. In training accidents, so we're talking about less than 50 people on average every year, 45, 50 people, give or take. Epidemic with children finding firearms and killing themselves accidentally, that is fear-mongering. It's not true. Some years you'll have a couple of kids, other years you don't have any at all. Are they tragedies? Yes. Are the parents responsible? Yes. Obviously, you got to make sure that, the kid can't get a hold of either the ammunition or the firearm. Or both. One without the others is no harm, no foul. But if they can you got to make sure that they can't get a hold of both. So you got to be, you got to obviously be responsible about that. Can't leave loaded firearms lying around. Now, again, in the States, it's a little different because, again, they got the Second Amendment. There's some people that have, a gun in the cookie jar, a gun in the freezer, a gun in the sofa, a gun in the behind the pillow, okay, well that's they're allowed to do that, so that's down there. Would I do that myself even if I was allowed? Probably not. My take is this: I don't care if you have a firearm for self-defense legally in the States. My issue is that if you're not around it, unload it. If you have to put a gun pretty much everywhere in your house, okay, you should just carry it on you. Why? Because if you have to be, default to a safe room or something like that, if you're in an area where you require that much security, I think that might be a bit much. Just keep it close to you. Just keep it somewhere where you can get to it. And if there's little kids around, then obviously, you got to keep it close to you. I mean, for the extra it would take to carry it, just carry the darn thing. That way you're in charge of it. Leaving it loaded and unattended is something I'm completely against.